Muscular system. Moving on. So the muscular system actually has more than just the function of movement. It also allows us to push food throughout our body because of the smooth muscle. It also opens our blood vessels, dilates them, and constricts them. It also generates heat. We have over 600 plus muscles. Muscle cells have lots of mitochondria because muscle cells, in order to contract, need a lot of ATP. And we know that sugar plus oxygen in our mitochondria produces ATP. And in that process, a lot of heat is released. So that's one way that we can regulate body temperature. This is shivering, right? When you shiver when you're cold. Now, cells can only contract. So if this is a muscle cell, right? When it contracts, it gets smaller. A muscle cell cannot elongate or get longer. And the way that they produce movement, we'll talk about in a second. 3 types of muscle. You'll need to know that. The first muscle is cardiac muscle. This is your heart. You'll notice that the cells are branched, right? They kind of are branching. They have these stripes called striations, and they have these other structures called intercalated discs that we'll talk about later. Skeletal muscle, pretty simple, attached to the skeleton, right? So this is 1 right here. This is 2 right here. These are 2. It's attached to the skeleton, and this is mainly for movement. And then smooth muscle, you'll find inside of a lot of our hollow organs like our esophagus, small intestines, stomach, also in our blood vessels, which allow for our vessels to get from this size, right? Here's a blood vessel. If it opens up and dilates, it can be much larger, right? Muscles do that. Or we can go from this size and even get smaller. That's called constriction, right? If we look at our skeletal muscles, notice that they have more than 1 nucleus. They have lots of mitochondria, and they're attached to our bones by something called a tendon, not a ligament. And they're nice and kind of stacked in these long cylindrical columns called muscle fibers, where a muscle fiber is the same as a muscle cell. So this right here, right, is 1 long muscle cell. This whole thing right there. A tendon, like we said before, attaches our muscles to bones. Where a muscle attaches is called the point of origin. Okay, that's where it attaches to the bone that doesn't move. This is the humerus. Doesn't move. Now, this is a bicep. We're talking about the bicep. The bicep attaches to the humerus. That's the humerus. Oops. Can't really see that. Sorry. So here's your tendon. Here's your tendon. This doesn't move. Now, this is, right, the radius and the ulna. It's attached to the radius. When this shortens, this moves up like this. So anytime you have the angle getting smaller, the angle right here, right? Let's look about 100 degrees. When it gets smaller, when we go from this to this, that is a flexor, right? It's flexing, getting smaller. Now, the triceps would be right here. Point of origin, point of insertion. There'd be a tendon insertion here. So here's your triceps. When these guys shorten, it pulls the bone that way and extends. That's an extensor or extender. Okay, and that's what those muscles do. We have 2 types of muscle fibers, muscle cells in our muscles. Fast twitch, which they, respond to really quick jerky movements, and slow twitch, which can have slow, sustained contractions. This guy's a marathon runner. This guy's a sprinter. Okay, so we'll call this guy person 1 and person 2. Who of the 2 have lots of fast twitch fibers? Yeah, fast twitch. This is slow twitch. Not that this individual is slow and this individual is fast, although they probably is. But it has to do with the ability for those muscle fibers to either contract quickly or slowly. Now, smooth muscle is what we'll find in the inner linings of a lot of our digestive organs, okay? This is not under what we call voluntary control, unlike our skeletal muscles, where I myself can control their contractions. You cannot tell food to pass through your esophagus, okay, through the process called peristalsis, right? The movement. So if this is my digestive tract and this is food, there are literally like wave-like contractions that propel food from your esophagus to your stomach, stomach to small intestine, and so on. So the muscle fibers wrap in this direction, right, around, and they also go in a longitudinal. They also wrap in this direction. We also have cardiac muscle, remember, right? This is only found in the heart and uses huge amounts of ATP because it's always contracting. There are these intercalated discs right here. They're like little doorways in between each heart muscle cell that allows all of the cells to communicate at once. It's very important for our heart cells to communicate at once because they have to contract at the same time in order for our heart to beat in rhythm, right? So there's these gap junctions, these doorways that allow the ions to flow in and out so our heart contracts in one beat. Okay, so how does a muscle contraction work? Well, let's look at the anatomy of a muscle itself. It's like a case full of packages of straws. So here's my case. Here's a package, and inside of the package has a bunch of straws. Another package of straws. Another package of straws, right? The muscle is the case. The package of straws is what's called the fascicle. The straws themselves, those are muscle fibers or muscle cells. Now think of the straw. Now look inside of the straw. Inside of the straw are individual tiny little protein rods called myofibrils. And even within those are even smaller protein microfilaments called actin and myosin. When I look at the smallest level of these tiny, tiny protein filaments, one of them being actin, this is called the thin filament, and the other one is myosin, that's this one right here. That's the thick filament, right? So this is the thick one, myosin, and actin. So this is actin right here. And this is myosin, right? They cling to each other, and the heads right here, this guy right here is this guy up here, and this right here is this guy right here. And they latch onto each other and slide across like this. They slide. So they attach and slide. And that causes the muscle to contract and shorten. Now you'll notice in this diagram right here, the little cone that's flying in right here, see this guy right there? Boop. That is ATP. So in order for us to contract our muscle cells, we need ATP. See this little circle guy right here? That guy right there coming in and bonding and moving away the binding site? That is going to be calcium. So it's important for calcium and ATP to work together for our muscles to contract, right? And so that's how we burn a lot of calories by muscle contractions, because you need a lot of ATP in order